All right. So for this example, we'll create, again, this is just a simple example. We'll create like a Craigslist kind of thing where you can post an ad. So we'll make an app. You should be able to go to a route. We'll have just two routes. One of them, you'll be able to see all of the ads, and the other route, you'll be able to create a new ad. So I don't have anything started here, so I'm going to create a virtual environment, Python -m vend, and I'll activate it. And then I'll install Django. Okay, so now I have Django installed, and I want to create a project. So I'll go Django admin, something like this. I'll cd into the project, and then I'll create an app. So now my structure looks like this. And first thing I'll do is I'll just tell the Django project that I have this new app. So ads. And that should be good enough for now. So in terms of the workflow, there's, you can start with the URL, there's the models, or switch around. So I'm going to start, we'll start all the way at the models. So this ads model, I'm just going to have one simple model, and it's going to be an ad. As usual, inherit from models.model. And then just again, keeping it simple. So we'll have a title. Max length of 100. And then content. And I will override the string method so that I can, well, actually first I will not override the string method. Okay, so I have this model. All right, so what do I do if I've changed the models? Let's say I'm done writing my models now.
Make migrations and migrate.
Yep, so Python manage.py. Okay, so now I have all this stuff going. So I'm gonna run the server. We'll create another. So we're not gonna have much to see right now. Okay, so I don't have any routes set up or anything. But I do have one route by default, which is one that Django gives me. This admin route. So I can go here. And I get this login form. So in order to log in, I'm going to need to create what's called a super user. So this is basically like an administrator level super user. If you use Unix machines, you know what a super user is. So in order to do that, I'm going to, Django has a command. So Python manage.py and then create super user. create super user, all one word. And then I'm basically going to fill out this form. So I'm just going to keep it simple so I don't have to type much. And then some of these you can leave blank by default. I'll use a very weak password, and then it's going to ask me, it's going to tell me that my password is bad, but I'm going to say yes. Okay, so now I have a super user. So I should be able to log in now. So I created a super user. Now I can go to the admin, the site admin, and log in. So now I'm in the Django admin console, and I can see that by default I have access to this authentication and authorization app, basically. So I have users. So I can see that that user that I created right there, and that is staff status. So I can do things here like create more users. So I can add a user. 2, and then so I created another user, and you can see that the password, so Django's taking care of this for me. I didn't have to hash the password or anything like that. And I can go back to users, and I see that I have this other user added, and it is not staff, so it's not a super user. And then of course you can create groups and add. So we're not really going to talk about permissions and things right now, but this is just an overview of what you can do. So the thing is, by default, we get access to users and groups, but I want, in addition to that, access to, let's say, my app. So I want to be able to access this model that I have, which is add. So just like when we create a new app, we have to tell the project about the app. So we have to go into settings and say, please take note of this app. We're gonna have to do something similar with the admin terminal. So for any app that you want to access in the admin terminal, you're gonna have to register it. And the way you do that is admin.site. So we're importing admin here from django.contrib, admin.site.register, and we're going to register a model. And the model we want to register is add. We'll register add, which means that we're going to have to import add. So from .model import add. All right, so now if we go, let's see, we go back to our home, and we see that we have access to this model that we just created, or that we've just registered. So we can actually go in here and we can add ads, right? So instead of going into the shell and adding things that way, we can also do it through a GUI. So there's lots of ways to add. If you want some dummy users just for testing, you can go into the shell and add users. You could, kind of ad hoc, you could write a script that has all the users that you want, or it has all the data that you want, and then run the script into the shell. You can also create fixtures, either for tests or just in general, if you want to pre-populate your database. And you can also go into the admin shell and do it this way. So something like, okay, so now we have 2 ads, right? Just created 2 ads. So these are in the database now. So this representation is the default, and it's not very helpful. So that's why we typically override the string method. We go back to models, let's go ahead and take care of that. So def str. Just display the title. And we may have to restart. Okay, good. So so we overrode the string model, and now we can the string method, and now we can see displayed nicely in a while. There's also a whole bunch of other customization you can do for the admin terminal, but this is like 90% of what you need to do. Okay, so we can go here. We can also edit. We can edit. We can create another one. We can delete it, and so on. All right, so that's the admin terminal. So now we have a couple of ads ready to go. So let's go back and then write some views. So I think I'll start with the project level URLs. And I want to write I need to write a new route here. So I'm going to import include, because I want to hand off this route to the URLs in my app, which I have not written yet. So path. So anything that goes to ads, I want my ads app to handle. Include. So hand that off to the ads URLs file, which doesn't exist. So let's make that. And then I'll do the boilerplate. So from Django.urls import path, and then our URL patterns. And we'll write at least our first route. So our first route is just going to be a list view. So we'll just get all of the ads. And I'll make this /nothing. And then the second parameter is going to be the view. So all ads, which has not been written yet. And I'll just give it a name, because there's a good chance we'll need to refer to this later. So all ads. Okay, so I have this, I'm telling the URL patterns about this all ads view function, which we haven't written yet. So I'll have to import it. .views import all ads. Okay, and I'm importing something which doesn't exist. So let's write that. So I go to views, and then I write def all ads. And the first parameter that I always need to have
request.
Yes, request. All right, so I've got my ads. Let's see, Jeff. So I have this view function, all ads, and what I want to be able to do is see all of the ads.
All right, so it'll just be the name of the model there. So we'll do capital AD.
Okay.
Dot objects. Dot all.
Okay.
And you got to assign that to a variable.
Okay.
Sorry. And then from there we'll use the render shortcut, or the render will return the render, I believe.
So yeah, so there's a render function, which will, the render function itself will return an HTTP response object, which is what all view functions need. So the first parameter for render
is just going to be the request or the response return.
It's the request, yep.
The request. And then we'll leave this one blank for a second, and then we'll add ads at the end, because that's what we're going to pass into it. Is that the context? Do you have to call it context, or?
You don't have to call it context. We can call it whatever we want, but we do need to pass it a dictionary. So it expects basically a dictionary. So ads right now is going to be what? What
Oh,
type
I got
of-
you. Yeah.
So what does this return?
An array of the objects.
Basically, yeah. So it returns a query set, which you can basically treat like an array. So this returns a
I
query
got
set,
you.
but we need an object to pass.
Okay.
it.
So below that, below ads,
Yeah.
don't we just we'll create the context like we did with the past. So context equals. And then
And we'll just call it, just so you know, we're clear that we can call this whatever we want. We'll call it
and
okay.
the curly brackets. Then from there, what we named those things? We named them. 1 second. On the models, we just called it. On the models again. So title and content. So title.
So the data is going to get passed to a template, which again we haven't written yet. But if ads is a query set, can we access the title and variable or title and content?
Yes, we should be able to, right? In the loop.
We could potentially loop over this query set and then pull out all of the titles and all the information from the models, but we don't really have to do that. So we can just pass this in as is and then handle the looping in the template.
Template. Okay.
So
then
yeah, go ahead.
So it would just be what we did in the past then, like when we pulled like student grades, we just did so it would just be ads equal the name of the variable ads.
Okay.
Or ads colon ads.
Yeah. So we can do this. There's I mean, there are different ways of doing this. If let's say we only wanted like the top 10 ads or the 10 most recent ads, we could adjust this query. We could, order by created date and then only take the first 10 or something like that. So there are other things we can do, but we're just, just to keep it simple, we're just going to grab all of them. So we have all of our ads. We create this this object because this third parameter expects an object.
Then the missing parameter there is going to be whatever the HTML template we're going to pass it's going to be. So we can name that in advance or whatever. So ads / all.
Okay.
All.html.
Okay. So then I go into the ads and
Gonna make a templates folder.
All right.
And then inside that you make a folder called ads to mount or just match whatever the app name is.
Mm-hmm.
And then inside that make the boilerplate all.html file.
And we're still not going to worry about redundancy in the HTML right now. So H1, just as a starter, we'll do ads. And then we want to display.
Okay, so it's the curly brackets with parentheses symbols.
Mm-hmm.
Then from there we do what we pass it as. What do we call it?
Ads.
Ads. So just be add in ads or for add in ads.
Okay.
Then below that, we can close it off now. So the N4, the same thing above. Then up in that, we can just 2 curly brackets.
Okay.
and it'll just be ads or add, and then whatever you want to display. So dot title, I guess we'll do.
Okay.
And if we want to do the other, if we wanted to add the content too, we could, but we just want to display the title for now.
Okay. So we could do this. Let's see. Not sure if it's all hooked up.
You still have admin there. I want to go to the actual page.
Okay, so let me make sure that okay, so no module name ads.urls. I think that's an older error. So add is not defined. So we can see here, it's telling us in views line 4. Add
But do we
the
ever
object
import it?
symbol.
I don't know if we ever imported it.
Yeah. So we're using add and we haven't imported it.
So from dot models, import ads.
All right. Let's try that again. And so we have the title and the content. So this works, but sorry, that's just the title. Is that just the title?
There
I
were
think
two
those are
record
both
types.
titles.
Oh, right. Yes. Sorry. Okay. So right. So here we're looping through them, but we're not really making HTML here. So ideally, we want to put this in HTML. And P. Okay, so we have proper HTML now. We can see that we have these two ads. So I think that's good basically for that. So we have that route taken care of. We can see all the ads. Now we want to create another route where someone can create a new ad.
Chad, I have a
Yeah.
quick question for you.
Sure.
While we're on the HTML, let's say I wanted to create a CSS and a JavaScript file to go along with the HTML.
Yeah.
Do we do that in the same folder, or how would we do that?
So it's slightly more complicated. So you'll have to create a static, something called it. So Django is prepared to do this. There's a way to do it. You have to create a static. So if you look in the settings, there is this static URL. So you can talk about that later. There's a couple steps involved, but yes, you can do that. There's just a specific way of doing it for Django.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so let's see. That's fine. We don't need that anymore. So we want to create this other route, which is going to handle creating a new one. So path. And we'll create a function. So new add. All right, so new add. So I have to go into views, and I'm going to create this function def new add request pass. We can check our route. Go to add /new, and the route works. but we get an error because we're not returning an HTTP response object. So, I as a user, when I go to /new, I expect to get a form, a blank form that I can fill out. And then when I fill it out, I want the information in that form to get processed and eventually an object in the database to get created. And then I want to be redirected back to the all ads view. So let's handle first off that initial form. So let's see. Greg, can you help me with the initial form? That initial request. I think you're muted.
Okay. So I'm gonna create a new ad.
So this route. So if I describe the situation, so I'm a user, I go to /new, I expect initially to get a blank form, and then I submit that form. So new ad has to handle two different kinds of requests.
All right, so we'll have to look out for the GET request,
Okay.
and then we'll have to return the HTML with the form.
Okay. That method. So I'll just create the dummy pass, and then okay. So now this route can handle GET requests and POST requests. So for the GET request, so here, so what we've done before, what we did initially is we can actually just write a normal form. We could just pure HTML, just write the form, create a new template, write the form in there, and then send that. So we can do that. We've done that before. But there's kind of two other ways that we can do this with Django. The first level, in increasing order of abstraction. So the intermediate level of abstraction, we can use something called a form. So Django has a built-in form class that will take care of some of this boilerplate for you. So I'm going to go into, I'm going to create a new file actually called forms. And then I'm going to inherit, I'm going to import the basic form class. So from Django import forms. And then my form class is going to look almost identical to the model. As you might expect, if we want to fill out a form that's going to create a new instance of this ad, the form is probably going to have to look pretty similar to the ad. So we'll create a class, and that will be add form. We'll call it add form, and that's going to inherit from forms.form. So Django has this form class, and it's the API looks exactly like this. So we're going to tell it what fields we want to include in this form that we're going to send to the user. So we want it to have a title, and we also want it to have content, but so the title, so over here at the model, we have a models car field. So here's some of the basic documentation for forms. And let me see. That list is here. It is not. Form fields. Okay. Well, I'm not going to worry about that right now. But so there's almost a one-to-one course, not quite, but almost a one-to-one correspondence between fields, these kind of fields in the models and fields in the forms. So title in the model is a car field. So instead of models.car field, we'll do forms.car field. We can also give it a max length. So this will handle, this is basically HTML validation. So we're saying we want this to be 100, just like our model, and then content. So there's almost a one-to-one correspondence, but not all the time. So forms, so you might think that there's something called like a text field. So forms.text field, that would be nice, but there isn't. So you have to use car field, and then there are things called widgets. And these are basically like add-ons. So we will do forms.text area. So there's a lot of customization you can do here, and some of it is a bit weird. It's a question of like looking stuff up. So this is how you would handle this text field here. So car field, and then tell it to use the text area widget.
Why can't you use like forms.text area? Like there's, if you do forms,
Because it doesn't exist. It's just one of those things. You would think that they would have something like that, but they don't.
But when I did it and I clicked on forms like it actually did have a text area.
Yes. So there is this thing, but it's not. It's not.
Oh, it doesn't exist. Is that part
Yeah.
of
So
it? Okay.
if we did that, it wouldn't work. So I could just show you real quick. So. Something like that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So this actually will not work, but we can see that. Well, I'll do the working version first, and then we'll check that out. So views. Okay. So we have this form now. Yeah. So we have this form now. So the way this works is if it's a GET request, we want to send an empty form. And if it's a POST request, we'll want to process that form. So we can create an instance of a form, and we'll have it be blank. So form is that form. So add form. And we'll have an empty constructor here because it's going to be blank. So I'll import that. So from dot forms, import add form. All right, so we'll have this module name. One sec, let me try this again. Use URLs line 2. URLs line 2. And then views, adds views, line 1. Oh, that was my editor being helpful. All right, so we're here. We go to /new with our initial GET request. We're going to create this form. And then we're actually going to send that form in as context. So this form, let's go ahead and print the form. You can see what it looks like. So you can see that it's HTML. So Django is, we are writing this class and Django is turning that just into HTML. So we could have written this HTML directly. We could have put it in, we could have done this a number of ways, but this is, a common pattern. So Django, that abstracts some of the dirty work for us. So this form is now just a bunch of HTML, and we can put HTML in other HTML. So we're going to create a new template. And we'll call this new.html. So if we were doing this strictly on our own, just from scratch HTML, we would create a form and then create some input fields and then submit button and all that. So Django, through the magic of the form class, is giving us this. But you'll notice if you look carefully that it's not really a form. There's a label, and then there's this input type. So we're going to get like an input box, but there's no submit button. It's not actually a form. So it's taking care of like the guts of it for us, but we still have to provide some basic structure. So we are actually going to have to create a form here. And then we're going to need to also create the submit button here. So All right. So we're going to have this form, and we want to get all this HTML in here. So we can do that just like this. So we'll create a context dictionary, and we can call this whatever. We'll just call it form. We can call it whatever we want. And then so form, I'll call it my form. We'll just get shoved in right there. So let's go back to the view, and we have this form, which is just this HTML, and we're going to create context. Yeah, context holds. And that will be form. And I'm going to return render request. And we're going to give it the HTML. So ads/new.html. And then this context object, which is going to contain that form. All right, so let's try taking a look here. And this obviously doesn't look very good. There are other customizations you can do to make it look better. One quick one we can do is that we can pass in like just the form itself. We can also, Django has some built-in methods. So as p, this will basically wrap everything in a paragraph, so it will show up top to bottom. So that's a little better, but you can still do a lot more customization, but we don't really care about that right now. So this works. Let's go back to the views. So now the first part is satisfied. So I go, I make a GET request, I see this empty form. Now, if I try to submit this right now, I'm going to get an error because I'm returning none, and I need to return something else. So if it's a post request, I'm going to need to somehow get the information in that post request, and I'm going to need to put that into, use that information to create an instance of the model, which is the ultimate goal here. So let's just we'll print that information. So print request dot post. So the information that we're going to get, basically the body of the post request, what's in the form, is going to show up in this request object, request dot post. So let's okay, so let's see what happened here. So who wants to tell me what happened? So
You don't have a method, an action, and a method on the form.
yes. So if I don't tell, so let's look at the HTML. So I have a form, and form, I didn't put anything here, but form, you can have an action, you can have a method, which we'll add in a second. I don't have that, but by default, it will make a GET request, and it will put the information from the form into query parameters. And then it will basically resubmit to the same URL. So we get the page refresh, basically, and that information from the form gets put into a query parameters. But we don't want to do that. We want to make a post request. So let's method equals post. And since we're going back to, since we're making a request to the same route, we don't need to specify the action. If we wanted this post request to go to a different route, we could specify that. So you have that now. So let's try that again. So one, there's a CSRF token, but let's see if we have. Okay, so we're not going to be able to see that because there's an error with the submission. So Django by default is going to, protect you whether you like it or not. And you have to include a CSRF token with every post request. So that is built in. So for every form you have in Django, unless you disable it, we'll do CSRF token. And you can include this anywhere in the form. So let's try this again. Okay, and this time we get a different error, which is the not returning an HTTP response object, because we are not returning an HTTP response object. We can see here that we have the information from the post request. Looking at our view, so the request.post, this is basically the body of the post request. Django added this, the CSRF middleware token, which is this called a nonce. It's like a one-off string for every form. So that Django knows that it sent you a form with this token, and so it won't accept a request coming from somewhere else. But we'll let Django handle this, but what we care about is title and content. So we can actually grab these. But we don't necessarily want to just grab them directly. We usually want to do some kind of processing or validation or whatever. So we haven't written any specific validators, but the way the built-in form works in Django is you check if it's valid, and if it's valid, then Django will modify that object, and it will create it will give you access to the cleaned values that you want. So here we're going to check. So if request dot oops. Let's see. Sorry. Okay, so I got a little off track. So we were checking the information directly on the request, which you can do, but since we have this forms, we can do something else that's what Django wants us to do. So instead of this blank form, we're actually going to create an instance of the filled out form. So in this case, form will be the add form, and we're going to fill it out, right? So we're going to create an instance of this form, and it's going to be filled out, and we can pass it the request dot post. All right, so now I'm going to print the form. And we get this form, but now it's filled out. Right, so it has the value of whatever nonsense I typed in there. Okay, so we have this form, and then what we're going to do is we're going to check if the form is valid. So if form, oops, that is valid. So if the form is valid, then we're going to get, Django's going to create a new attribute for us called cleaned data. So we can print that. So here we get this object, which is just title and content. So we can grab both of those things now. So just reminder, our ultimate goal here is to create an instance of our model, right? We want to add something to our database. So now we have the information that we need, and we're sure that it's valid at this point. So we're going to say title equals and content equals. Okay, so we have the data that we need, and now we want to create an instance of our model. So we have that imported already. So we can do add dot objects dot create. Title is title, and content is content. So I'm going to try doing this again. We had an error here, but this should have saved before that. So I'm going to go to all, and this gets created right there. So we start with this form that we made. We have this form. We fill it in with the post request data. We check if the form is valid. If the form is valid, Django is going to create this new attribute called cleaned data. And then we can access the values that we want on this clean data attribute. And once we have those, then finally we can create an instance of this model. And then, yes, question.
Yes. What does it mean for a form to be valid?
So that will depend. So you can have other validations. So we wrote validators for models. You can have validators for forms as well. So it's, what counts as valid can be customized.
For now, is it the max length equals 100 or whatever it was for our our model?
Yeah. So I'm not sure if what is valid on a model calls exactly off the top of my head. But it's definitely customizable. Okay, so we have our form now, and the basically universal pattern for submissions or making post requests. You make the post request and you get redirected somewhere else. So we are going to return redirect. We have import redirect. So we can return redirect, and then I'm actually going to use reverse as well. So we could hard code a path from Django. And then that will be, we just call it all ads. Refresh that, go to new, create new ad. It creates it and I get redirected. Okay, so this is one way to do it. So at the lowest level, like no abstraction, is you just write the form entirely yourself, and then you go through the request object and pick out everything you need. The next layer of abstraction is using Django forms, this form class, where you create a class that's that you will have to make look like the model, and then you can pass that form in as context. And then when you get the request, you'll go through this pattern where you check if it's, you'll kind of recreate the form based on the post data. You'll check if the form is valid. You'll pull out the information that you want, and then you'll create the corresponding model, the object you want in your database. So there's another level of abstraction, which is something called model forms. So Django has forms, it also has model forms. And as we've seen, the relationship between a model and a form is often very tight. So Django will allow you to use that basically in your favor. So I'm going to comment this out, and I'm going to create a new class, and it's going to inherit from, let's see, class add form dot model form. So not from form, but from model form. And this works slightly differently. So we're gonna have to, it's basically gonna take whatever model we give it and do all of this for us. It's gonna kind of mirror, it's gonna create a form that mirrors our model. So you're gonna have to create, this might seem a little strange, but we're gonna create an inner class called meta. And Django uses this pattern in a few different places. Class meta. And you can think of this, it's basically just like an object. So this is just a bunch of attributes that this class can have. And the class meta, for a model form, it requires two values. One is the model. I believe it's model. And we're going to tell it what model it's based on. So in our case, that's ads, or add, sorry. So it's add, which means we're going to have to import this. So from dot models import add. And we also have to tell it the fields. This is title, content, whatever. So there are a couple ways of doing this. There's a shortcut where you can just have it display all of the fields, but usually you're going to want to specify. So we can do title and content. So this could be a tuple or a list, whatever you want. So this add form, this is basically how you do it. So it's abstracting some detail. So you're just saying, hey, make me a form based on add, and the form should include these two fields. Okay. So let's try running this. So far the GET request works just the same. So I have this add form, which is now this. I can pass it as context and so on. So that works the same. I try submitting, you can actually, so you can actually skip a lot of this boilerplate here. And you can do save. Let's go back to new. So if you will, you know, some of this is the same where you have a form and you're gonna basically create a new instance of this form that's filled out. You'll check if it's valid, and if it's valid, then you save it. So you don't have to pull out all of the individual items and then create a new instance. It will just take care of all that for you. So it's just another layer of abstraction on top of everything. So that's the basics. You're free to use whatever you want, but yeah. All right, and then so for today, yeah, so you can work through this README if you would like. You don't have to, but if you would like, it's probably helpful to go through. And then the challenge is a to-do list, which is slightly more complicated than what we've done before. All right, and I can, yeah, I can post this code up to my GitHub account as well.